Welcome to the Rebirth Podcast. I'm your host, Shea.
And I am Corey.
And tonight we're going to be talking to licensed therapist Gregory Sneed. We're going to be talking about Black men and mental health. So make sure you tune in tonight, like, share, and subscribe.
Out of the ashes we will soar to a destiny we can't ignore. Heartbeats echo through the night with every dream and endless flight. Together strong, let's break the mold. Our rebirth and stories told. It's time to renew, rebuild, restore. Unlock the dreams we've been waiting for. Rise up higher, more and more. With every breath, a new dawn's roar.
Happy Monday. Welcome to Rebirth Podcast. I'm your host, Shay.
And I am Corey Wilkerson.
The thinker.
I mean, I figure, if you had a tag, then I could say, but yeah,
Right.
Thinker, yeah. Still thinking.
Still thinking. Thank you guys for tuning in. Happy Monday. Happy Monday, Corey.
Happy Monday.
How was your weekend?
It was good. It was good.
That's
Weather
good.
held up.
Yes.
So, it's good. You know what I mean?
Well, you see, I've been out tanning a little bit.
I can tell.
Yeah,
I can tell. I mean,
couple shades more chocolate.
Yeah. You keep adding pieces to the oasis.
That's right.
And, you got to test it out. So
that's
where
right.
the tan
That's
is coming
right.
from.
Absolutely.
Got it.
So all the month of June, we have been celebrating Men's Mental Health Month. And tonight we have a special guest that's going to shed some more light about Black men, and mental health. But before we get to him, you have an interesting shirt on tonight.
Is it interesting?
Yes.
What do you
I
see?
like it.
What
It
do you
says
see?
Black men have feelings. Could you please talk to me about what's behind the shirt?
Well, do you believe it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Just testing you. That was a test. That was your certification for the night. No, but I think that this is super important. I think that when I got this shirt made, I always feel like we don't always get a chance to express ourselves fully. And whether we suppress our emotions or people feel like we're supposed to show up a certain type of way, I think that we need to continue to have the conversation that Black men have feelings, we have emotions, and we have something to say other than what we're expected to say. So
yeah,
figure you got to start somewhere with me, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you think that, and this is a question that we could ask our guest when he comes on as well.
Yeah.
So you have the shirt on.
I do.
Right?
Mhm.
But I know you do because we've had conversations, but do you think that, yes, we know that you have feelings, but why do you feel that sometimes men still have a hard time connecting to those feelings and emotions to be able to convey it?
Yeah, I think we do. I think the other piece of it is that while we've always had feelings, I think the conversation is still new. And I think that we have a lot of feelings that we want to, it comes out like word vomit a lot of times, or emotion, or frustration, or anger, or silence. And I think that while that's still happening, we're trying to put words to our emotions, emotional intelligence to how we're feeling and things like that, right? So I think we want to make sure that it's important that not only we're promoting it, but we continue to find language to put to our emotions and our feelings.
Absolutely.
So yeah, starts with just saying it and then getting y'all to say it, and then creating the space for us to continue to express. So
that safe space.
I think that's the safe space.
Space, yeah.
And our guest tonight, I know he started to have like short clips talking about he's posted on social media talking about tips on how do we deal with our feelings and emotions, or mental health tips for us as men. So super important. So continue to press it, continue to express it, and honestly, I would say to challenge it. Sometimes it can be difficult to find space for us to express emotion, especially when it's met with resistance.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we're not going to keep you guys waiting. So if you have any questions or comments, make sure you put them in the chat, and take a moment to subscribe to tonight's podcast and share it. Share it with a man.
Share it with a man.
Share it with a man, and share it with a woman, because I think we need to understand and we need to learn more about how you guys show up,
Absolutely.
right?
And comment, ladies.
Yeah, and
Comment.
comment.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm very excited about our next guest, Mr. Gregory Sneed. He's a licensed clinical social worker here in the state of Delaware. So welcome to the Rebirth, Greg. How
Hello,
are
hello.
you?
I'm pretty good. How are you guys doing today?
Good,
Good.
good.
I'm
So
glad to
you're
hear
the owner of Greater Self Therapeutic Services. Tell us a little bit about you and your company.
it. Yep. So I decided to start a mental health practice in 2022, designed primarily for men. I want men to feel like they have a representation in a counseling/therapy space, someone that looks like them, someone that can connect with their emotions, someone that feels and experiences the same thing they do. I feel like
I love
ladies,
that.
have that representation, whether it's, someone that
Mhm.
looks like them or someone of a different race. I feel like there's not enough African American men and not enough men in this space. So,
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Congratulations on your company.
thank you.
Definitely needed.
Absolutely. Greg, what made you decide to be a mental health therapist yourself?
To be honest, I started off my bachelor's in criminal justice.
Okay.
In 2008, the first place that hired me was Delaware Department of Corrections. I worked at Gander Hill for a while as a correction officer, and
Oh, wow.
it was touching to see like some of the 18-year-olds or young 20-year-olds who would come in and they almost felt like jail was like a rite of passage. It's almost like they were enjoying it. They took pleasure in it, right? Where I was, scared of going into that environment, they embraced it, which, really, really concerned me. So I wanted to try to help and wanted to reach people in a different aspect. So I decided to go back and get my master's in social work. And I started off working with teenagers and families at Delaware Guidance. I worked for the Center for Child Development for a while. Then I worked in they call them assertive community treatment teams in Delaware, the ACT teams with individuals with severe persistent mental illnesses. And then I decided to start my own practice.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations again, because I think that's big. And it takes a lot to run your own practice. Not only are you running it, but you also doing, providing the services as well. So I know that's a lot, but thank you for doing the work and doing what you do.
Thank
Yeah,
you
one
guys
of
for
the things I
sharing
wanted
your
to ask
platform.
you. Go ahead.
Nope, I was just saying thank you for sharing your platform. Me and my wife
Absolutely.
attended one of the Rebirth Lives as a date night, and it actually sparked some great conversation between her and I. We really enjoyed it. She enjoyed it. So definitely thank you for sharing your platform.
Nice. Good.
Awesome,
That's what we
awesome.
want. That's what we want to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So the question I was going to ask you is based off of what you were just kind of talking about, and as to why you wanted to start your own practice and things that you saw in the correctional facilities. What are you seeing now? So now that you are out there, you have your own practice. What are you seeing as 2025, right? Obviously, it's a very unique year. But over the last 3 years, what are you seeing from that particular demographic, like that 18-year-old? Me and Shea have young men, right? 18, 19 years old. What are some of the things that you're seeing as these folks kind of come into your office and are talking about that we should make sure that we're putting out there to the universe?
Yeah. So that 18 to 25 demographic, what I'm seeing is they're having troubles with that transition. Right now, they are considered adults and they're in the work field or they're in college, and life may not be lifing or happening according to their plan or according to the expectations that they have on life or the expectations that society or us as family members are placed on them. And they're actually struggling with, hey, I should have been making more money by now. I should have owned a house by now. I should have done this. When in reality, everyone has their own journey, their own experiences. So it's really unfair to compare themselves to, other people's expectations.
Yeah. Where are they getting some of those? I can only imagine where it's coming from, right? So I think because we get caught up in it even as older adults, right? But where do you feel like they're getting some of these false representations of where they think life should be at 18 and 19? I don't know if I felt like I wanted a bunch of money at 18 and 19 when I was 18 and 19, right? But I don't know if I had some of these and there's nothing wrong with having these high aspirations, but I think that, and I'll just call it out, like social media will put out fake narratives of what it looks like or where you think you should be. And so like, where do you feel, in your opinion, they're getting some of this from?
I think definitely to start, like you said, social media. A lot of them grew up in that era of seeing social media and seeing with the lifestyle that everyone's portraying. I mean, but to be honest, I think
Mhm.
some of it comes from that the expectation that society has placed on them, especially when it comes from
Mhm.
young males and being raised by single mothers. Sometimes men have that instinct to provide and protect, so they feel like their legacy just is not just going to affect them and their children, but it's also to reach back and take care of mom or nieces and nephews or other people. So I feel like society has taught us to put a lot of expectations on ourselves to do very well, because we're not just in it for ourselves. We're in it for, the generation behind us as well as the generation to come.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Last week, Dr. Parker was on, and he was talking about how the nation need Black men, um, for many different reasons. But hearing that the nation need Black men, it's a powerful message that we put out there last week during our podcast. Why do you think that the nation need Black men? Why do we need our men to to show up and know that they're loved and worthy and they're powerful?
That's a great question. I think the black men need to feel, and if I don't have not answer the question right, let me know. I feel like the black men need to feel worthy and appreciated and valued, because it
Mhm.
starts with that relationship, that connection, right? If someone doesn't feel like they're worthy or they're recognized in return, they're not going to be able to give that back to, their loved ones or to other people, right? Because if their
Right.
self-worth is they don't have any self-worth or don't have any identity, they're not going to be able to show up as well as they could show up if the relationship was give and take, if they were being fed into and given
Mhm.
into and grow and then they would be able to do that to the family in return.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
When you hear like some of the, and I don't know what like the group of young men that come maybe to your project, even what you say, like sometimes you always feel like you want to catch them early, right? Remember like the dare programs used to come into the elementary
Mhm.
schools and talk
Mhm.
about drugs, used to have these different
Mhm.
commercials. I was laughing at this comedian that was on social media. He's talking about we need to go back to like the 90s and the commercials, right? I haven't seen a Frosted Flakes commercial in in years, right? But what that says to me, like when you think about like this is your brain on drugs, you remember that?
Right, right. I
Right? Or
remember.
you used to think about
Mhm.
like, it's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are?
Mhm.
Right? Or you think about the teen summits and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, what are some of the conversations that we should be having? And I don't want to say, and maybe even how early should we start to have these conversations? Because when we talk about um, the world needs Black men, I agree, obviously, right? Um, but I also want to make sure that we are speaking to them in a way that we're changing the language, right? So yes, we need you to
Mhm.
be strong, and we need you to be smart, and we need you to be powerful, whatever those words are. But we also need you to have emotional intelligence for
Mhm.
yourself, right? We also need to introduce how you should show up in society for yourself, and how you should show up for society and advocate not only for your family, because sometimes like when we enter single parenthood, mother, father, sometimes we put unfair expectations on our kids, right? Sometimes we introduce them to adulthood super early,
Mhm.
and then we want to reel it back when it gets out of hand and they don't know how to control it. So I think my question is, what are some of the things that we should be talking to our children about earlier, before they get to 19, 18 years old, and even at that age, to help this process or help the work that you all are doing in the community?
Yeah, I think it starts with us as men and as parents immediately, right? I think it's so important to help young men identify how they're feeling, right? Recognize that emotion and how do you manage that emotion, right? And I'll be honest, I got two boys and I'm guilty of it, as a father sometimes of telling you to suck it up or push through. But it's extremely, extremely important to help your son recognize, hey, I'm really nervous here, right? Or I'm
Mhm.
afraid here, or I'm hurt here, right? I feel insecure. I feel like my talents isn't matching up to whoever. And now how do we work through that issue? I think sometimes that big boys don't cry, right? Or men don't cry. Like for instance, your
Right.
shirt, black men have feelings too. When men are taught to silence that inner feeling that they have, they hold on to it, and that follows them throughout adulthood until they have some type of breakthrough. Right. So I think
Yeah.
at the earliest possible teaching a young Black man, 4, 5, 6 years old, how to identify what they're feeling and how do you work through that emotion, right? I tell my sons all the time, hey, it's okay to be afraid. It is okay to be nervous. It's okay to be scared. But now how do we work through it, right? What do we got to do? What coping skills can we use here? Do you got to take some deep breaths? Do you got to hum your favorite song in your head? Because it's essentially, we do have to work through that emotion, but it's okay to feel it. It's not a weakness to feel afraid or scared or
Right.
hurt.
Yeah, for sure. What are some of the common issues that you're noticing with the men that that's coming into therapy?
Yeah. I feel the majority, I feel like, have that anxiety, that persistent, constant worry about the future, about what's next in my life, what's next at home, what's next at work. A lot of it is, even with the older men, the older than 25, who've been married for a while, learning to communicate their needs to their wife, learning to communicate their feelings to other family members, right? Realizing that, hey, just because I feel this way, I'm not placing a burden on them, right? But it's okay for me to communicate, hey, this is what I need. This is how I'm feeling, right? This rubbed me the wrong way. So I would say definitely the anxiety, depression sometimes because of the weight that they're trying to carry alone, being unable to communicate those feelings and identify.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I see the same thing. I see the depression definitely coming through, and of course it's identified as something else in the community as anger or aggressiveness, but most of the time, it is depression, or what he's saying, the anxiety as well. It just looks different.
I got a question out of curiosity. It just popped in my head. I'm thinking, right? What are some of the examples of the first time a man or a young man is introduced into dealing with their emotion? Right? Sometimes we used to talk about, like, sometimes our daughters, the first time they're introduced into whether it's sexual activity or at least curiosity, is through some man, like, protect your daughter so they don't have to deal with your crazy son or something like that. But what is the first time that our young men had to really go deal with their emotions, right? Is it in the first time they get into a relationship? Is it the first time they're met with some type of adversity? First time they have to go up against a teacher that they don't agree with? What are some of those early conversation or those moments of friction that they have to run up against where they get to express themselves, and I just don't know how to do that?
That's a good question.
I actually find it a lot in relationships with their spouse, with their wife, right? Because now they're put in a situation where you can't run from that communication. I got to look this person in the eye each and every night, and she's doing something that's rubbing me the wrong way. I'm doing something that's rubbing her the wrong way. So do I hold on to it and build that resentment and bitterness and hatred towards her, right? Because she's almost demanding that I communicate. She wants me to be present. She wants to know what's going on, but I don't know how to express her. I don't even know how to identify it. So I see it a lot there. I see it a lot in the workplace as well. If they're meeting some type of adversity or some type of situation with a coworker or sometimes their supervisor, and having to actually deal with it and communicate that emotion or that feeling.
So you're saying you see it later on in adulthood for you. You see it later on in adulthood. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I definitely agree to that. And I think for me, having two sons, I immediately went to the first time that child is hurt, how the parents respond to them, how they interact with them, right? I think that's kind of sets the tone of how a child learns how to emotionally regulate themselves. So which we do as moms, our sons fall, and if dad is in the room, we want to, go pick them up, but dad may be like, get you good, wipe it up, like, you good, brush yourself off, or the example of having a little boy and a little girl and they both fall. Most people are going to run to the little girl to make sure she's okay and tell the little boy to, you know what I'm saying? Has those feelings and emotions was they addressed? When the little boy gets up, is if he's told to suck it up or to brush it off, we're telling him not to cry, not to express his feelings. So I kind of, I definitely agree with what Greg is saying, but I also think about the younger age, um and how we learn how to express our feelings even as little kids, and a
Yeah.
lot of us don't
Yeah.
know how to do that,
Yeah.
which leads to when they get into these adult relationships
Yeah.
not being able to
Yeah.
do that as well.
Yeah. I'll tell you, like one of the things that, to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, I felt like I did that with my son, right? If he
Uh-huh.
fell or hurt himself, I'll pick him up just like I mean, I probably run quicker to my daughter, right? But
Hmm.
I definitely picked him up and like, made sure that cared for him similar ways, or made sure that I nursed him back to health, whether he
Hmm.
was sick or whatever. I tell you the point where I wish I would have done better.
What's that?
How I dealt with my own feelings and failures and emotion,
Mm.
right? Because I felt like me holding it in or going to deal with it when they went to bed or when they were away, that was doing the right thing. Like I was protecting them from, allowing them to be children. They don't have to, whatever.
Mhm.
But me
Mhm.
suppressing how I feel or how I deal with life,
Yeah.
right? Teaches them how to suppress either from me
Right.
or suppress from themselves. And then you have to work backwards. So like I learned that over the last 5 or 6 years that wasn't
Mhm.
the right thing to do. I thought I was
Mhm.
doing the right thing, right?
Mhm.
So because immediately going to care for and sickness and providing and supporting and helping and showing up to schools and all of those things are great. But if you don't prepare them to deal with everyday life, because they sometimes they see that through you,
Right.
that could be a detriment to them as well.
It's so crazy. Like that's exactly what like I've been like researching and looking up. Like sometimes we don't show a lot of times as men, like we want to keep that superhero mindset or that mask. So we don't show
Mhm.
our kids our vulnerabilities or our weaknesses. So a lot of times,
Mhm.
sometimes if there is a man present, we grow up with that, superhero feeling that, dad didn't feel or dad didn't,
Right.
go through struggle or dad never failed because he, like Corey said, he hid that from them. He didn't want to show them that moment. He wanted to protect them. So I feel like it's just as important for our kids to see our weaknesses and our vulnerabilities, of course, in a healthy light, and just like they see our
Mhm.
successes and our, our triumphs as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would be some ways, and I'll maybe both of you can and give at least one or two. What are some ways that you would give men a pathway to showing that, expressing that to their children, right? Um, because I think it's super important, right? How do they deal with their first relationship, right? Because these kids today are like super advanced, like they're dealing with stuff that at least in my generation, we had nothing to think. We didn't even think about half of this stuff, right? But they're dealing with stuff so early and often. They have access to
Mhm.
like like my son and my daughter's generation are like that generation 2002 and 2005. They were born. It's like when it started introducing iPads and started social
Mhm.
media,
Mhm.
and obviously COVID was a big impact on just isolation and just strictly dealing with things from a technology level. Um, what are some ways that we can talk to them about what we're going through while do we still hold on to that? I'm an adult, you're a young adult. How do we express some of those things and walk them through by being vulnerable?
You want me to go, Shay? I say literally just having that conversation, right? I think one of my videos on social media was the XYZ of communication, straight telling them, hey, I feel, overwhelmed because whatever, because of bills or because of stress. And just having that
Mhm.
those delicate, difficult conversations with them to say, hey, one, we're modeling to express our feelings. And two, we're also modeling, hey, I'm human. I have the full range of emotions. I feel too. Just
Mhm.
having those difficult conversations with them. I'm
Right.
not saying place all the burdens of the world on them, but share those vulnerabilities, through communication, through conversation.
Mhm. Absolutely. Um, a technique that I use for not just men, but I use this for women as well. I do a little shadow working. Shadow working is it, the questions could be very simple but complicated at the same time. Greg, you ever use shadow work?
Not much,
Any shadow
honestly.
questions?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's so let's say if the client says that they feel frustrated, right? They're frustrated or they feel like a failure, right? That's not the first time that they felt like a failure. It's not the first time that they felt frustrated. So a simple question like, when was the first time you felt that feeling?
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And you'll be surprised where they take it. You know, if they said that they feel like a failure right now, they're in a marriage, they feel like a failure. And I'm saying, when was the first time you ever felt like a failure? They may go back to my dad when I was younger. I felt like I could never please my dad or be good enough for my dad, right? So it's just like simple questions because those feelings that they're feeling are very familiar to them. You know, the other thing I try to do is ask them when it comes down to, you said, how do you work with them?
Yeah.
I ask them, what do you think your younger self needed? What do you think your younger self needed during that time?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I also realize a lot of men have not forgiven themselves for certain things, you know, things that they probably really shouldn't have held themselves accountable for because they were young and it was their parents' responsibility to make sure that they were okay. But of course, we know as adults, we're responsible from healing from all of that. So I will always just go back to, what do you think you needed at 12? What advice would you give yourself? You know, now that you know, what would you say to your 12-year-old self or your 13-year-old self or wherever, you know, however you were, how old you were when it happened.
Yeah.
So those are some things that I use.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Mhm.
I think it's funny. Like, even I think we still deal with it. We talk about Black men and feelings and how we express ourselves. And I'll ask Greg, do you feel like that is talked about or cared for as much even today, right? Like right now, as it could be? Like, what are some idea on areas on how we can kind of continue to push that forward for our men expressing their feelings, Black men expressing their feelings, and being transparent and being vulnerable in spaces, right? So we think about family, just like in basic conversation, right? Do you feel like that's received, or what are some ways that we can continue to push that?
I honestly do not feel like it's received, right? I feel like when in the marriage counseling, I hear a lot of times, it's always, to be honest, the woman brings a man to marriage counseling more than likely, right? And once we get in there and he finally starts talking, instead of her listening or trying to understand his positioning, I don't want to say always, but a lot of times it's immediately dismissed, right? He's being told that he shouldn't feel that way, and these are the reasons why. So I think it's really important to, when you want your husband to be emotionally available and present, and you want him to communicate, when he does speak up, to listen, right? Listen with the intent to understand. And if he brings something to you, right, own it and see how we can work through these issues together. I think society kind of moves the goalpost sometimes, where we want men to be emotionally present for us, but when they speak up and identify emotions, it can be looked down upon or frowned upon or immediately dismissed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think too, what comes into play, and I see this a little bit with Black women, right? I see this a little bit with Black women. I don't want to say that this is a Black man thing. I just think that when you're dealing with non-Black, this comes into play. When we're expressing our emotions and we're expressing our feelings, I think both of us are met with, we're angry or we're being aggressive. We're passionate. It's not that, I think the tone, the level, that becomes like a red flag or an alert to someone that may not look like us when you're trying to express the feelings. So when you're met with that, then now you're shutting down because, what do you think, Greg?
No, I completely agree. That tone, that demeanor, the eye contact
Mhm,
is extremely, extremely important during that conversation and how that
mhm.
message is going to be received. I think sometimes, like you said, when we're animated or we're loud, the message that you're actually trying to say is going to get misconstrued, and they're not even
Yeah,
picking up on what you're saying. They're reading your
yeah,
body language. They're listening to the tone of your voice, your eye contact. They're looking at the motion of your hands. It doesn't even matter what you're saying at that point.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I also think a lot of when it comes down to, and I want to talk about that a little bit too. Just our interaction with the police, because I think a lot of that has to do with what we just said.
Hmm.
If we got to be a certain way, and if we're outside of what they think we should be, now it becomes confrontational, right? And now you may not walk out with your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Very true. Um, you know, talk about timing, right? You think about what's been going on over the last couple weeks with this immigration and what's happening in LA, and now it's
Mm-hmm.
starting to happen in other cities across the United States. Um, it's terrible that we still are met with this type of lack of understanding by the people that are supposed to protect us,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Or supposed to connect with us from an understanding perspective, or supposed to de-escalate a situation.
Mm-hmm.
um and it continues to evolve and get worse, and we're having to continue to find new ways to communicate
Mm-hmm.
when we haven't got the basics down,
Right.
right? And it makes it super hard and scary from a parenting perspective, because once our kids leave the house, the world
Yeah.
starts to influence, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I continue to
Mhm.
speak to the level of emotional intelligence that we have to have.
Mhm.
Your
Mhm.
circle setting matters, and who you're continue to associate yourself with, how you dress
Mhm.
today, right? Like that matters as well, right? And I think, again, learning how to communicate in um multiple settings, right? And I will always say to, even my children, it's like, it's just as important that you learn how to communicate outside of your race as you do in,
Mhm.
because they may not necessarily understand your mannerisms or why you move a certain way, and you have to be diverse in that respect. And you should also teach yourself how to do that, and vice versa, right? I think it's just super important, because these cops don't always look like us,
Mhm.
you know. So again, teaching us, especially us men, how to work through our emotions, how to communicate and put a word to it or an action to it. Um, it just has continues to have way more implications in life, because if you don't, it's going to cost you a lot. It could cost you your relationship, it could cost you your job, it could cost you your life, as you kind of
Mhm.
talked about. Um, and we have to continue to make that a regular conversation.
So how do we, what is our takeaways for this? Because these are the conversations that I really want to have at Rebirth Live. I want us to put things, out there and really have our audience talk about some of the things that they struggle with, and they're able to walk away with some type of takeaway. We may not have the solutions, but we may have something that they haven't heard before, right? So, what would be our takeaway for tonight? And I'm going to say this for y'all too, as Black men, because that's what the show's about tonight. But what would be your takeaway, Greg? What would you want to leave the people with in
I
regards
think
to this
I think
conversation?
I think Corey hit it on the head, right? Being mindful of your emotions, right? Being able
Mhm.
to identify in that moment, whether it's a conversation with your wife, your boss, or the police officer, how am I feeling? Right? Am I afraid? Am I nervous? Am I, do I feel like this police officer is belittling me? Right? Now that I'm mindful of how I'm feeling, now put my action to it. How do I communicate to this officer, to my wife, to my boss, exactly how I'm feeling without coming off as the angry, aggressive, big black guy? So I think it's
Mhm.
extremely important to be able to identify those emotions, being aware of them and being able to communicate them effectively.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I seen, and I could kick myself because I forgot to do a snippet of this, but I posted on my social media. There was this powerful video that I saw with a black police officer. He looks like he may have been like a captain or something, and a young a young black man. I don't know how old he was, but they were in each other's face, and they were saying this is like the level of masculinity that is just so powerful. They were in each other's face, and the teen he was up against the car, but the black officer was in his face. You couldn't hear what he was saying, but just watching it, you can tell that everything he was saying, it was from a place of love and concern. And he just kept looking at this young man in his face, and he was talking at him, and the young man he put his head down a little bit, and he kept going like this. And then after the officer said what he said, he just grabbed him and embraced him, and the young man just laid his head in his chest and just cried, and they just hugged each other. It was so powerful, and I wish I would have played it on here, because it just it's like, in my mind, that whole conversation was, I would love to see that happen in our community.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? That is what is missing in our community. And I get it that, it's scary, because you don't even know if you can approach a young man like that today without them pulling a gun out and, shooting you,
Yeah.
but that is really what's missing. And I don't even know what the story was, but that video went viral, and it was just music behind it, no words, but just watching it, it was like you had your own story as to what was going on. And that young man needed a father figure in that moment, where that it could have totally went left. He embraced him and he hugged him, and he, in my head, told him, look, I need you to show up. I'm here for you. I might not be your dad, but I'm here for you. You're not by yourself.
Yeah.
And he just hugged him, and just like the teen, he just like hugged him and was like hitting him, not hitting him to hurt him, but just like his emotions, trying to let out his emotions. So that was very raw, and very chilling for me.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
I didn't. I thought I knew
man.
what you were speaking about, but no, I didn't see that.
Yeah, did you see it, Greg?
No, I didn't see it either.
You didn't see it either? I'm gonna send it to both of you.
Okay.
It was really good. Yeah, I'm gonna send it to you. So what about you? Is there?
I would say it's important to meet our young men where they are. And I think that for us as older black men, fathers, uncles, even brothers, and I'll extend it also to mothers and sisters and aunties, we have to disconnect from what we think their response should be and how we think they should feel, and meet them where they are, because some of the things that they're dealing with, and I just learned this through my own parenting journey still, right? Some of the things that they're dealing with, we have to work them through it, because sometimes we put our expectations on them. Well, this is how you should respond. Mm-hmm. This is what you should be doing. You should have did this. Well, I think that all right, that could be true, but at the end of the day, our goal is not always the end result. Our goal is to help them work through it while expressing how they feel, while expressing fear, and how do we support them through what they're feeling in the moment, right? Because once we get to, if we're already at the finish line, it can be daunting for you to get to the finish line. I may just give up, right? Because I haven't even addressed none of the emotions or the things that I'm feeling and how I even got here, right? So sometimes we have to just pause and say, what do you need to happen in this moment for you? Right? What are you feeling? What are you most fearful of? Those are the questions to get to the finish line. Sometimes we already approach it at the finish line and say, come on, right? And sometimes, I think you touched on it earlier, sometimes it's having to be the parent or the brother or the mother or the sister that you needed in the moment that something happened to you. And sometimes we have to be cognizant of being in the moment with them.
Yeah.
Those small things matter. Going to the doctor with your children, or talking to them with that problem, and sometimes you have to become that level. When I went through that, tell your story. When I went through that, this is what happened to me. And you'll be surprised, like, what? I didn't know you went through it. So I would say sometimes we have to meet our kids or our brothers where they are. You know, we are all one decision away from being in a crazy situation.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
And having those difficult conversations is very important. Because like you said, that example you use, like when I went through that, letting people know that you don't have to suffer alone, or you don't have to live in your head and own it by yourself. You have a support system, you have a supporting cast, that other people have similar situations or similar circumstances, and this is how we can work through it together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. This was a powerful conversation tonight. I really thank you for coming on and sharing, your insight. Are you taking new clients?
Yeah, of course, yes, ma'am. I'm taking no account of new clients. I set most major insurances in the state of Delaware, including Delaware
Mhm.
Medicaid as well.
Okay. And how can someone reach out to you? How can they get in contact with you?
Yeah. So my phone number is 302-305-3819. Or they can look me up on my website, www.gstherapyservices.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And just so you guys know, Greg is actually going to be one of the panel members on the Rebirth Live that's coming up in October. So you will see him again. And thank you for all the work that you're doing with our men, because it's really really needed. And we appreciate you. So Corey,
absolutely, thank you for the work you're doing. I'm tuning into your clips
yeah,
on social media. So
yep,
I don't know if you
sharing
shouted
them,
that out already, but definitely make sure that you shout
yeah,
that out if you haven't.
yeah,
But those tips help. Those tips help.
absolutely,
Appreciate it,
yeah,
appreciate it. I mean, you could
yeah.
definitely follow me on Facebook as well, Gregory Sneed. On Instagram, I'm greater underscore self therapy. Oh, yeah.
Yes, yes. Yep, yep. So if we can support you in any way, please let us know. If you have anything coming up, please let us know. You're a friend to the show, so we will definitely support anything and get behind you, you and the work. Okay.
Yeah, and thank you guys for having me on again. And I look forward to October. Either way, like I
Yes.
said, my wife loved the date night. My wife felt like she was young again. She was drinking, singing, dancing. Like it really just stimulate like great conversations for us that we, continue to have
Awesome.
in the car ride home and even on the next day, the next day. So
That's
Awesome.
good.
That's cool.
Good. That does my heart good.
Yeah.
Thank you for
yeah,
that. I appreciate that. And tell your wife I said hi.
I definitely will.
All
Definitely
right.
will.
Thanks, Greg. Have a good evening.
All right, you guys too. Thank you again.
You're welcome. So that was a great
It
conversation.
was.
And again, I don't know if we said it, but June is Mental Health Month for men. Totally left out.
You know.
June is Mental Health Month for men. Men's Mental Health Month, however you want to say it. And plus it's Father's Day month. And if you've been following us for over the last few years, every June we really try to just make the month about the men.
Yeah, it's again, it's super important to just
Mm-hmm.
continue to lift our men up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think we sit back and admire the community that women have, for whatever the cause is, right? You
Yeah.
just have a sense of coming together and a sense of resilience to work through, and we need to adopt some of that, not only for ourselves
Yeah.
but within our community. So I appreciate June as
Yes.
Father's Day and Mental Health Month, but
Yes.
it's important that you are making that and talking through that every June. So thank you.
Yeah. Every day, not just every June, just
Yeah,
every
yeah,
day,
yeah,
every
yeah,
month. You
yeah,
know what I'm saying? We highlight it more in June,
yeah.
but if you really listen to the Rebirth, we talk about men's health throughout
Mhm.
our season. We focus on men, we focus on women, we focus on relationships, and we definitely focus on mental health. That is pretty much our
Yeah,
platform.
for sure.
Every now and then we might go off a little bit,
Yeah.
but usually those are the things that we really focus on, and that's really just making sure we're supporting and we're healing and we're educating the Black community and the family, our Black family period as a whole. So we are one show away from ending
Season
season 4,
4.
guys. One show away. So next week Corey and I will be back, and we're going to be ending season 4. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's been a lot of good
And
stuff though.
yeah, we're gonna take some time and rest and renew, rebuild, and restore ourselves. And we'll be coming back at the beginning of August. But you will be having we're gonna have some shows that we'll be what you call them, reruns.
Reruns.
We'll be replaying in the mix and just to keep you guys connected about what's going on. So if you have any questions or comments about tonight's show, please hit me in the inbox, or you could put it right there in the chat, and we'll make sure that we, try to answer any questions.
Absolutely. Well, another Monday down.
Another Monday down, y'all. We'll see you next week. Until then, you guys have a blessed week. Good night.